Damn it, why must these ore veins spawn in the worst possible way every time? See that guy? That was me, the first few times when I was starting out in Dyson Sphere program. Now, if you don't want to be like him or just interested in learning a bit more about resources, logistics and construction, stick around for a full summary. Quick side note, this is part 2 of the Dyson Sphere series, where part 1 covered most things about power production. I leave a link to it in the card if someone is interested. Anyway, when freshly landing on a planet, getting the resources out of their nodes is obviously the first necessary step. Resource veins can be extracted by hand, very tediously, or with a mining machine. These function in a straightforward way. Cover ore veins with a mining cone in the front and raw ore will come out from its back. Useful tip: mining machines can be freely rotated and placed while simply holding down shift, which this idiot here by the way noticed far too late. Also, stacking multiple entities on top of the same node is the best method for increasing its overall output speed, and completely surrounding a whole ore patch eliminates the need to relocate individual machines when it has partially dried up. The other but much simpler node type remaining would be an oil seep. Tapping these is just simple click and drop with the respective oil extractor. That's literally it. Even though water doesn't have a dedicated mining location, it can technically also count as a raw resource that shares similar click and drop extraction mechanic, just like the before mentioned oil seeps. Now, before we're actually processing these raw resources, let me go over everything that falls under the basic logistics category first, starting with transport belts. These come in 3 different versions, yellow, green and blue, delivering more items per minute the higher the tier. Placing them is as easy as picking some from the build menu or your inventory, clicking on a start point and finishing it with clicking on an endpoint. Boom! Items can now travel automatically from A to B freely. Like in this example, where the mining machine is providing iron ore to the belt that brings such closer to my production facilities. Let me mention here that belts cannot overlap with each other directly, but do not fear any necessity for making complex geometric arrangements though, since the devs were nice enough to give us the ability to build belts in different heights, smoothly ramping up and down, which resolves this general overlapping problem in most scenarios. Splitting and merging items from one belt in 2 or the other way is a different story though. For that, the splitter building comes into action. It has 3 different variants that can be cycled through with tab. Each version differentiates themselves in unique input and output orientations. One input and one output of bespoken building can be given a priority and a filter if necessary, making it a great tool for all kinds of applications. Quick side note, a separate splitter is not always needed when it exclusively comes to merging items, because belts can natively form a T-junction to combine 2 lanes together as well. Lastly, no foundation or any solid ground at all is required when placing belts at any height, though sadly only a few entities can directly interact with them, like splitters and mining machines. Many other require a sorter to move valuables to buildings and vice versa. These also have the same 3 different tiers, increasing in transport speed and stack size if researched by each. Funnily enough, a sorter cannot be placed on its own since it always requires a valid source and target. Any building that has these distinct I/O port geometry at the side can be connected to with a sorter. Also, do not worry about not perfectly aligning the belts to the machines, since sorters have some leeway in being placed angled slightly to the left or right. Okay, with mining 101 and basic logistics now out of the way, we can take the first step in our rapidly upscaling automation journey and finally build some factory assemblies. This here, for example, is a facility that makes red matrices. Most of the item transportation is a very simple flowchart-like manner from crafting step to crafting step, with the exception of this one priority-based hydrogen rerouting over here. Basically, most hydrogen that comes out from the refineries goes back into the loop. The rest lands in a separate storage tower, with eventually more of such similar structured production outposts working diligently towards researching new stuff. We eventually unlock logistic drones, stations and carriers. This is probably one of the biggest turning points in a safe game and lets you re-evaluate the current structure of all of your facilities. The best and most powerful fact regarding this new building way is the tremendously outstanding modularity that it offers. From this point on, balancing any shortcomings in production is very easy. You're just going to add another production lane and the issue should be taken care of. Oh, and while I'm at it, I'd highly recommend automating the construction of all related buildings if you're somewhat serious about making this your new standard method. Well, with all of the praise out of the way, let me demonstrate what this design is all about. This here is a new mining outpost, which amasses iron ore in its storage. Traditionally, we now would have to clearly design a transport infrastructure like multiple belts to all machines which need such. In the new version, however, is bespoken infrastructure obsolete and replaced by the drones now carrying iron ore to any place that requests it. This distributing and requesting principle goes for all later ingredients as well. Now, one of such requesting places could be a production lane dedicated to iron plates. Here, iron ore comes in at the right station and finished iron plates land back inside of the left station. Quick side note, to achieve the highest modularity possible, it is best to assign each of these production lanes to just one exclusive product. From here on out, your job basically boils down to copy-pasting production lane blueprints and occasionally adjusting the crafting recipe of them to fit the current needs. All other stuff is now in the hands of autonomous flying units swarming all over the place. And this is not just restricted to the residing planet, since logistic carriers can fly freely through solar systems and even further out using space warping technology. I do have to admit though that this high modularity comes with two slight drawbacks. The first one being the inability to prioritize resources to specific production lanes purely with logistic stations. I have ran into an issue before where my labs ate up all of the antimatter that I was producing. Unfortunately, that left the antimatter fuel rod outpost, which was standing just one planet away, with empty hands. You can probably guess what happened further on and why I had to manually reboot production and the power grid at said location. The second point has to do with room. As you may know, planetary and especially interstellar logistic stations take up quite a lot of space around them when placed. This deceptively harmless fact does have quite some impact though in a scenario where stacking as many of them as possible on one planet is vital to optimization. Even more when going for a symmetrical look of your production assembly, be aware that some of that space is kinda wasted. In my opinion, definitely worth though for such good looks. To summarize it all in one sentence, single production instant base design offers high amounts of modularity with the occasional loss of space and a separate hybrid solution required for a priority selected distribution. Finally, let me quickly finish with a few words regarding some leftover buildings. First, the automatic piler. It stacks multiple items of the same type together on one belt slot. Apart from pushing as many matrices on one belt as possible when doing research, I don't really see much added value in most scenarios when using it with assemblers that create intermediate products. Second, the proliferators. Slapping these on production lanes which are producing intermediate products can be quite powerful and result in some nice extra output. If you have some coal veins to spare, consider boosting your facilities with the green MK2 version. If you're now asking why not use the blue MK3 version instead, I'd answer that their productivity increase is merely plus 5%, with the drawback that they require carbon nanotubes to fabricate, which by the way are also needed for frame material. Third and last on my script, logistic distributors and logistic bots. These are, sadly, in my opinion, not powerful enough to carry the weight of a planetary infrastructure exclusively. Them being completely useless isn't true though, since they can automatically restock Icarus with items that are in chests close by. Definitely a quality of life step that I can recommend setting up. Anyway, this now concludes my general overview. I do hope that it helped a bit in untangling Dyson Sphere's quite complex logistic embargo. Feel free to leave any feedback in the comments if there was any particular step that I could cover in more detail or any other mechanic that I have maybe missed. Peace!